It's been 1 year since the Justice Department released Special Counsel Robert Mueller's 448-page report on Russian interference in the 2016 election. The former FBI director's nearly 2-year investigation concluded that Russia meddled in the election to help Donald Trump win. He did not find sufficient evidence that the Trump campaign had coordinated with the Russian government. On the question of obstruction of justice, Mueller's report didn't conclude that the president should be charged with a crime in accordance with federal guidelines. However, the report also made clear it does not exonerate the president either. For a look at the legal ramifications of the report, I want to bring in Rebecca Roiphe. She's a CBSN legal analyst and former assistant district attorney for New York County. She joins me now from Sag Harbor, New York. Rebecca, thanks for joining us. When you step back and you look at this broadly, what do you think has changed constitutionally in the year since the report? Are there any laws that are different?
So I don't think constitutionally things have changed. The Supreme Court hasn't weighed in on this one way or another, but I do think that the president and his administration pushed back against the report and the subsequent congressional investigation in a way that was new and unprecedented. And in doing that, he set a new precedent for future administrations. I think there are just norms and practices that most presidents in the past have complied with that he does not, and that he did not. And that, in a way, alters the constitutional balance, not because the Supreme Court has said this is what the Constitution means, but because so much of our constitutional practice really does depend on, just the way things are carried out.
Interesting to hear you say it's changed somewhat of the constitutional balance. How do you think it's changed presidential and congressional powers?
Right, exactly. So I think in the normal tradition of it, presidents have pushed back on congressional efforts at oversight all throughout history. Presidents have said, we were not going to comply with this particular subpoena. I'm not going to let that particular witness come and testify. That is something that has happened traditionally throughout history. What is new and different about this administration's reaction to the Mueller report and to the congressional investigation into the Russian meddling in the 2016 election is that this administration pushed back in a wholesale kind of way, saying we don't view this as legitimate. Therefore, we refuse to comply at all. And in that way, just by merely asserting that, and in some ways succeeding in that assertion, this administration has altered the balance of power between Congress and the president, and that normally there has been an acceptance that Congress's role is a role of oversight. And here, at least in this particular instance, the president and his administration pushed back and said that in this particular instance, it's not legitimate oversight. And normally the president doesn't get to determine which kind of oversight is legitimate and which isn't. That's Congress's job. So in having succeeded to a certain extent in doing that, this president has altered what had been a traditional balance of power and really a kind of a vying for power between these two branches. Now, it seems that the presidency, at least at this point, has won in a certain way that the founders had envisioned this battle between the two branches, but not one branch winning over another.
People may have forgotten, but about a month before that report, the Mueller report was released, Attorney General William Barr released a controversial letter of principal conclusions from the report. That letter has since been seen really as somewhat of an effort to misconstrue what Mueller wrote. How has the Justice Department under William Barr changed its role in the year since that report?
So the Justice Department has changed in multiple ways. I think one of the ways in which Bill Barr has altered the Justice Department is that in addition to asserting the power of the presidency over the entire executive and the power of the executive over the entire federal government, Bill Barr has also centralized control of the Department of Justice within his power. And again, traditionally, we've had a decentralized legal system in our country, and that's a recognition of a couple of things. One, it's a recognition that we have a number of states, we have localities, there are different values, and we embrace that. It's also a recognition that political appointees should not have control over individual investigations. The idea is that every different prosecution should be governed by law and fact in an even-handed way, rather than political or partisan considerations. And over the course of history, the decentralization also serves that end, because the people who are in charge of individual prosecutions are not the political appointees. They're not the ones who are closest to the president or have a partisan interest in the outcome of individual cases. And Bill Barr has significantly altered that balance of power, exerting more and more control over these local prosecutions. And I think we need to keep our eye on whether that's a permanent change or it's merely a change of this administration.
Rebecca, I'm curious, do you think that the Mueller report has somehow changed how the U.S. will conduct independent investigations?
I do. I think that there are essentially two goals to an independent investigation. An independent special prosecutor is meant to be kind of an adjunct. What the special prosecutor is doing is serving a constitutional role, helping those who are supposed to hold the president constitutionally responsible for his conduct. And those two bodies are the public, the voting public, and Congress. And so in the Mueller report, Mueller viewed his role as that. He tried to get facts out both to Congress and to the public so that they could hold the president responsible. And I think he both succeeded and failed. He succeeded in getting facts out in a way that I think most people, not everybody, but most people trusted his underlying evidence. Most people said that would have faith in the facts that he put forward. I think he failed, and in part, I don't think this was entirely his failure. I think the failure was also Bill Barr's, but he failed in getting these facts out in such a way as to preserve the independence of the Department of Justice. Because when Bill Barr came out and said there was no obstruction of justice, he essentially stepped on Robert Mueller's toes and said, no, you know what? I know you think your job is just being an adjunct to Congress, but in fact, we as prosecutors have a job of determining whether or not this conduct was appropriate or not. And in doing that, he cast some shadow over the Department of Justice that in fact it has a political horse in the race, that it's really trying to gain some political advantage for the administration. And that, I think, was a failure of the Mueller report. So I think in the future, we need to look at what's going to happen to investigations in the future. And I think Congress and perhaps the Department of Justice itself will look at the rules establishing special prosecutors and will try to strike the right balance between accountability and independence. And I think the current rules unfortunately made some mistakes and some errors. And those errors were revealed in that particular battle between the Attorney General and Robert Mueller. And I think once everything has calmed down, both in the world and more generally in politics, that there will be a close look at how to reconfigure these rules such that we can preserve the independence of the investigation against partisan influence in a more effective way. Because while it was partially effective in getting those facts out, it failed in terms of that final assessment of the legal meaning of those facts.
Rebecca Roiphe, so grateful you can join us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Nice seeing you, Rena.